People ask me what it felt like to be there. When the John first saw us. Really, I saw us, and I tell them it felt like nothing at the time. That is always the honest answer. The weight of it came later. The way deep cold only reaches the bone an hour after you have come in from it. In the moment, I was watching a sensor board, breathing recycled air, and keeping my voice steady on the comms log. The enormity arrived on its own schedule. I was 41 years old, and had been assigned to the Ines Morn Ridge for 11 months. She was a stealth cruiser, long, narrow, built for silence rather V, no broadsides that would make a historian weep. No cathedral superstructure climbing above the hull to catch a painter's eye. She was a knife kept in a drawer, and the Navy preferred it that way. Was senior signals analyst, which meant I spent my watch reading what the dark had to say. On the day in question, the dark had a great deal to say, and none of it was in any human language. The vein had first appeared on our survey charts 14 years before the Morn Ridge was commissioned. They were old. Not old the way an empire grows old, but old the way a mountain range is old, in a way that makes the word almost meaningless. Their stellar holdings stretched across 11 systems. Their communications moved in frequencies we had taken 3 years, just to recognize as intentional. When our xenolinguistics teams finally cracked enough of the surface structure to hold a rough exchange, the vein indicated they had been monitoring human signals for 230 of our years. They had chosen not to make contact. The reasons, rendered imperfectly into standard, came out as something close to. They had been waiting to see what we would become. 230 years. My grandmother's grandmother had not yet been born when they started watching. The diplomatic mission to Vaishen space had been running for 4 years before the Morn Ridge joined the escort screen. It was not a dramatic posting. The VN received our envoys politely. They answered questions with the measured patience of beings for whom a decade was a rounding error. They treated humanity with a warmth that was genuine, I believe, and also faintly condescending in the manner of something very old addressing something very young. Their transmissions often referenced our species' trajectory, where we had come from, where they supposed we were headed. They called us, in their own tongue, a term the translators rendered as the new fire. It was not meant as an insult. It was meant to be generous. That is what made it land the way it did. The Morn Ridge had been holding position at the outer edge of the escort formation for 31 days. Standard procedure for a stealth hull. You remain passive, you observe, you say nothing. I had cataloged 612 distinct vein signal patterns across those 31 days, and had found the work absorbing in the quiet way. Deep space signals work tends to be absorbing. You are listening to something that has been alive longer than your civilization has had writing, and even the routine traffic carries a frequency that you feel somewhere behind your teeth, if you know how to pay attention. On the 32nd day, we received orders. The diplomatic team had reached a specific juncture in the talks. The vein delegation had asked, formally and through proper channels, for a complete account of humanity's military capacity. Not a threat, not a demand. It was framed, our translators were careful to convey this, as a scholarly request. The way an old professor might ask a student to describe their field of study before committing to a mentorship. The Vein wanted to understand the scale of what they were dealing with. They believed they already knew. 230 years of signals intercepts had given them a working model of us, and the model said, young, energetic, promising, small. The orders to the Morn Ridge were simple. At 1400 hours station time, she would decloak. The honor guard formation that had been holding stealth around her. 5 ships, each larger than the Morn Ridge, each silent for 32 days, would decloak with her on a 2-second stagger. I watched the countdown on my secondary board and kept logging. That is what I remember most clearly. I kept logging. At 1400 hours and 0 seconds, the Morn Ridge powered her active array and let the stealth field drop. The vein sensors were, by our intelligence assessments, approximately 40 years more advanced than our own. They did not miss us materializing. What I was watching on my board was their reaction. The signal traffic inside their formation. The frequency shifts, the sudden density of communication moving between their ships, at a rate that our pattern recognition systems flagged immediately as anomalous. In 32 days of observation, I had never seen them transmit at that rate. It looked, in the visual representation, our systems rendered it as, like something igniting. Then the honor guard came out. The Innis called her first, 2 seconds after us. A dreadnought, blocky and massive, the kind of ship that makes the space around it feel smaller. Then the Ines Reeve. Then the Ostmark and the Tanager, and last, at the edge of the formation, the Ian S. Permanent Record, which was a carrier and whose silhouette, when it cleared stealth, briefly interrupted the light from the nearest star, on the Vane formation's direct line of sight. I know that because I checked the geometry afterward. I wanted to understand what they had seen. What they had seen was 6 ships they had not known were there. 32 days of watching us without knowing they were being watched in return, and the quiet, unhurried answer to a question they thought they already knew the answer to. The Vane transmission traffic did not stop. It changed. The rate held. That ignition density I had flagged. But the pattern shifted from the tight intership chatter of a formation processing new sensor data into something longer. Something that moved between their ships in the rhythms our xenolinguistics team had previously associated with deliberation, with recalibration, with the particular kind of silence that is not absence but consideration. They did not respond to our hail for 11 days. When they did, the message came through the standard diplomatic channel, addressed to the human envoy team, and our translator worked it for 6 hours before presenting a final rendering. I was not in the room. I read the transcript the following morning in my bunk, on a tablet, still in my sleep clothes. The Veen had retired the term they had been using for humanity. The new fire, the phrase our translators had been rendering for 4 years as a kind of affectionate shorthand, the condescension wrapped in warmth. They indicated with considerable diplomatic care that the term had been a product of their model of us, and that their model required revision. They did not say what the new term was. That took another 3 months of talks and 3 more translation cycles to render adequately. When it finally came through, the phrase the translator settled on was something close to the long patience that does not show itself. I have thought about that phrase for 22 years. I have turned it over in the dark the way you turn over a stone that is heavier than it looks. The Vian had watched us for 2 centuries and built a picture of what we were. And the picture was wrong, not because we had deceived them, because we had simply not yet chosen to show them. 32 days of 6 ships saying nothing, 230 years of a species watching another, and thinking they had seen enough to name what they were looking at. They had been waiting for us to become something. It had not occurred to them that we had already become it, and were merely choosing when to stand up. The Morn Ridge was decommissioned 9 years after the contact event. I attended the ceremony. It rained, the way it always seems to rain when the Navy retires a ship, as if the sky is being appropriately formal about it. I stood at the back of the gathered personnel and thought about silence. The particular quality of silence that a stealth hull carries, 2 days of it, 6 ships breathing quietly in the dark next to a civilization's, that was certain it understood what humans were. The van sent a delegation to the decommissioning ceremony. That surprised some people. It did not surprise me. They are old, and old things understand that certain silences deserve to be witnessed when they end. The delegation's senior representatives stood beside me at the back of the crowd. We did not speak. After a long while, as the ceremony closed and the last formal words were said, he turned to me and inclined his head in the vain gesture that our cultural team had spent 2 years pinning down as something between acknowledgement and respect. I returned it. I had practiced. He said something in his own language that was not translated for me until later that evening. The rendering came back as, we were mistaken about the patience of young things. I told him we had heard worse.